Cinema, in its purest form, was the silent era. Black and white silent films captivated the world. Then came sound.
In the electrical recording of sound, there is employed a pickup microphone.
Then came TV, and then came color. Color was great, but it almost obliterated the art of black and white cinematography. We can't see in black and white. It's another world. That's what makes it even more special. So let's take the color down to 0, adjust the contrast and brightness, and pretend that some things are just better in black and white. When I was a kid back in the 80s, my best friend's grandfather was driving us somewhere at night and he turned on a radio show from the 30s called The Shadow.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
The thrilling adventures of The Shadow are on the air. Brought to you each week at this time by your neighborhood Blue Coal dealer.
From there on, we would tune in regularly on the radio late at night to this nearly 50-year-old radio drama to be transfixed to the man who knew the evil that lurked in the hearts of men. As time faded, we forgot about The Shadow until about 1994 when the film The Shadow was released into theaters as a big-budget franchise starter for Universal Pictures. The 90s were a great time for cinema and originality. However, The Shadow was not one of those original ideas. The Shadow began in 1930, simply as a mysterious narrator of the radio program entitled Detective Story Hour, which in turn was created to boost sales of the Detective Story magazine. Publisher Street and Smith, along with writer Walter B. Gibson, didn't anticipate the popularity of the narrator, who became more popular than the shows he was narrating. It was soon decided to spin off the character into his own magazine and then radio program. Rising to such a fever pitch in popularity, even Orson Welles joined the fun and voiced many of the episodes.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows.
With radio, magazines, comics, and book series all in place, a film series wasn't far behind.
This is The Shadow. Money. Thousands of dollars in vaults. A woman greedy for love, for gold. Watch carefully while this story comes to life.
A series of short films, narrated by the character, appeared in the early 1930s. However, his first solo big screen adventure wouldn't occur until 1937 with The Shadow Strikes, and its sequel, International Crime, in 1938.
Last night, young Michael Nolan took his pretty fiancée, Dorothy Walsh, for a drive along the scenic highway overlooking the city. With a bright lover's moon overhead, they stopped to enjoy the view and to romance. Today, police discovered their bodies in Nolan's car and are holding a transient named Miller for the murder.
The Shadow would return in the 1940s with a 15-chapter serial from Columbia Pictures.
I'll talk! Don't listen to him, Judge. That guy's liable to say anything to protect himself. What do you mean, sir? Arrest that man! The Shadow! Yes, the Shadow. Stand away from that prisoner.
The Shadow's theatrical fun would have a few more solo adventures in the 40s, and one picture in 1958 entitled The Invisible Avenger, before going dormant for about 35 years.
Evil abounds everywhere, with only the Shadow to challenge the powers of darkness.
Universal Pictures resurrected the property with The Shadow in 1994, directed by Russell Mulcahy and starring Alec Baldwin as the titular character. Bill Finger and Bob Kane were obviously very inspired by The Shadow. Its influences are abundant, and in fact, Finger even admitted to using a shadow story, Partners of Peril, for Batman's origin story, saying, "My first Batman story was a takeoff on a shadow story." It's hard to ignore the similarities between the two multi-millionaire Playboy alter egos. Holy plagiarism, Batman! In 1989, the Bat himself had his big screen blow-up, and studios were eager to cash in and began searching for like-minded properties to spin off into Burger King merch. Universal, seeing the obvious similarities in the Shadow character, went all in, and production began on the big-budget period piece extravaganza.
Next time, you get to be on top.
Ironic that the Shadow himself now found himself in the shadow of his own inspiration.
Where did that come from?
The clouded mind sees nothing.
The Shadow starts off with a rousing opening sequence in Tibet, but from the jump, once the color is out of the picture, the film takes on a different identity.
Turbo.
In Tibet, Lamont has rechristened himself as Ying Ko, who rules as the butcher of a criminal empire. Taken captive by the mystic Tulku, he is to be redeemed from his dark heart as the nemesis of evil who has the power to control the minds of others as the Shadow. Seven years later, Cranston sets up shop in New York, fighting crime as the Shadow. The opening scene on the bridge in black and white is spectacular. With the backdrop of the mid-1930s, it's as if you step back into a gangster film like Scarface.
Get out of my way, Johnny, I'm gonna spit!
Both producer Martin Bergman and director Russell Mulcahy were childhood fans of the character, and that love is all on screen. With the ability to cloud men's minds, Alec Baldwin's portrayal of the Shadow is hyper cool in black and white. Mulcahy, who had made Razorback and the cult classic Highlander, showcases some of his trademark camera moves here and is clearly having a blast on set. And there are several similarities between this film and Highlander. New York setting where two old foes from the past come together to fight for supremacy and the right to rule. However, no ties to the Duran Duran videos that I could notice. Although, back to Highlander, there's a lot of glass breaking in both films.
There can be only one.
I think Russell Mulcahy has a glass fetish. We are introduced to a great supporting cast that includes John Lone as the villain, Shiwan Khan, the last descendant of Genghis Khan. Penelope Ann Miller is so striking as Margot Lane, whose character dates back to the beginning of the Shadow's creation.
That's so odd. I was thinking the exact same thing.
Peter Boyle is the Shadow's trusty driver Mo, and Ian McKellen as Margot's dad, Reinhardt. Tim Curry and Jonathan Winters also join the fun.
Come out of here and fight like a man.
Alec Baldwin is clearly channeling the matinee idols of old as his alter ego Lamont Cranston. And Penelope Ann Miller is cooking as the femme fatale Margot, who isn't afraid to go head-to-head with Lamont, whose powers of controlling the mind don't seem to have an effect on her.
You will forget about me.
Why would I do that?
You will give me no further thought.
Are you drunk?
She has psychic powers of her own that she has yet to unlock, which makes their love story even more interesting.
We need each other.
No, we don't.
We have a connection.
No, we don't.
Then how do you explain that I can read your thoughts?
My thoughts are hard to miss.
And why is that?
Psychically, I'm very well endowed.
I'll bet you are.
The Shadow was not well respected when it was released in theaters in 1994. Giving it a second shot in black and white is so fun because it ties back to all the great films from the 30s and 40s. Unlike the Richard Dix Whistler series from the 40s, the Shadow is not just the observer of the proceedings or the crypt keeper of the episode, but he's the protagonist, trying to contain the situation. David Koepp's tight script keeps the film moving at a perfect pace, keeping its pulp origins intact. And that could be exactly why it failed to connect with audiences at that time looking for a more contemporary Batman sequel than a period piece superhero film. Director of photography Stephen H. Burham's photography here shines in black and white. He also shot Francis Ford Coppola's black and white film Rumblefish, and has gone on the record stating he wished he could have made The Shadow in black and white, but that the studio refused his request.
The sun is shining.
But the ice is slippery.
Burham was also Brian De Palma's DP on 9 films, including Body Double, The Untouchables, and the first Mission Impossible film. He was certainly no stranger on how to light for pulpy situations like the film required. Director Mulcahy's slick camera moves and Burham's lensing make a tantalizing combo on this film, much like his work with De Palma. And if one thing ties this film together like no other, it's the original score by the legendary Jerry Goldsmith. It's a totally unique and ingenious score invoking the mythical realm. This might be one of Goldsmith's most underrated scores that mixes symphonic and electronic vibes. There are also many callbacks to his Chinatown score here as well, mixed with a little fantasy twist. The challenge of translating a radio show that derived much of its power from its audience's own imagination is not an easy task. And especially so with how jaded modern filmgoers had become at the time this iteration arrived in theaters. Production designer Joseph Nemec gave it a distinct charm that has the feel of what audiences might have been imagining listening to the radio show 50 years ago. This nostalgic charm didn't hit with audiences in 1994, but in black and white, it's a damn blast, and you can't deny the craft everyone is putting in behind the scenes. The Shadow is not a perfect film, but it is a fantastic realization of a property that's nearly 100 years old now. When in black and white, you are literally transported into a world which these characters and events should be happening. It's an underappreciated gem that deserves a major reevaluation, whether it's in color or in black and white.
You speak Chinese.
Only Mandarin.